This meeting is being recorded.
She's noisy. Wonderful. Welcome everyone to our statewide Zoom meeting for all aboard Ohio. We've had a very busy couple of months through all of our whistle stop events. Just really been a successful series where we were able to present the economic impact study that All Aboard Ohio commissioned on the 3C and D corridor, which many of us are very excited about. We talked through the corridor ID process. So one of the current federal funding mechanisms for passenger rail products. And that's kind of the whistle stop story. And the target audience was primarily the board members of the regional planning organizations, right? So if you think about NOACA up here in Northeast Ohio and MORPC in Central Ohio and those types of organizations, along with elected leaders, business leaders, community leaders. So it's really been a successful event for us. We've had a lot of wonderful media coverage. So I'll throw a link. When we see media coverage, we put that up into our feed on the All Aboard Ohio webpage. So my name is Brian Shriver. I am a volunteer board member of All Aboard Ohio. I'm the director of the Northeast chapter and I live near Cleveland, so we've had a lot of our events in the Cleveland area, and then some closer to Akron and things like that as we build up. It's wonderful to see the team from Youngstown here in the library there. That's always great to see. We appreciate the participation, and we'll talk through. We've got a couple of exciting topics today that I'm really pleased that we've had an opportunity to present. So I will very briefly share just to give you an idea of what's going on in this meeting today. Make sure I share the correct screen. All right, I guess it's screen 3 and one more click for Zoom, and then everything moves around. Anyway, maybe just give me a thumbs up when you can see my screen. Wonderful, thank you. So we'll have a brief welcome here, and then the topic that I know many of you are excited to hear about, the Cuyahoga Valley Scenic Railroad up here in Northeast Ohio has a proposed extension to downtown Cleveland. And Ivan is here from the National Park Service to tell us about what's going on with that project that we're all excited about. Just got a big grant for a feasibility study from the regional planning organization here. So that'll be about the first half of the meeting. So Ivan's got a short presentation, and then we're going to have some questions specifically on that topic that I know many of us are excited about. And then the second half of the meeting, past board president of AAO, Ed Votto, is going to have a transportation policy discussion. So I'm looking forward to seeing that presentation. Ed's been spending a lot of time working with the Lakeshore Rail Alliance as we look to make improvements on the Lakeshore corridor, one of our critical passenger rail corridors through Ohio and connections to both Chicago and to the East Coast. And then we'll see how much time we have for Q&A. Our scheduled meeting is an hour, and that'll be when we kind of conclude the formal meeting. But I do have more time than that, and I suspect other folks do too. So we'll stick around if there's other questions coming up. So anyway, that's our
my presentation should be more interesting than it sounds.
Ed's saying I didn't set it up well enough.
No, it's fine. It's obvious.
We'll get to that. So anyway, just a quick note on some upcoming events. Most of these are currently posted on the All Aboard Ohio webpage. So if you go to that page and go to events, these are things coming up. Of course, on Monday, we've got the Lima Whistle Stop, right? And as I mentioned, that Whistle Stop is a presentation of the economic impact study and an explanation of how the corridor ID process works and what types of things we'll need to be doing here in Ohio to prepare for the future rounds of funding. Next month, if you're saying, hey, I would have liked to see this whistle stop presentation, I didn't get a chance. Next month on this statewide call, we will deliver the whistle stop presentation, right? So if you didn't get a chance to see one of those in person and you want to see that yourself, call back in for this meeting next month on April 13th, right? So second Saturday of each month. And then we've got quite a few chapter meetings coming up. So I've got a list there. Most of these are on the webpage there. But March 16th in Columbus, March 27th in Cincinnati, April 12th in Toledo, And then the following central meeting is April 20th. Up here in Northeast Ohio, we will also have a chapter meeting on April 20th. That's a Saturday. Don't worry, Joe, I put it in the afternoon so we wouldn't conflict with Clevelanders for Public Transit. Library told me we've got the same room. April 24th in Southwest, and then I'm really excited and very relevant to this topic. I've had good conversations with Joe and Ivan, and we are looking forward to tentatively getting a maintenance facility visit to the CVSR up here in Northeast Ohio on June 15th. So that's a Saturday if you want to kind of mark that on your calendar and then keep an eye out as we pull the information together. So that is my welcome. So I will stop sharing my screen if I can remember how Zoom, there it is, does that. And we'll turn it over to Ivan to talk a little bit about this CVSR extension proposal.
Well, thank you very much, Brian. It is great to join everybody this morning. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this project. And just right out of the gate, I'm sitting in a very old Victorian house in Western New York state, and I'm already getting some warnings that the internet's a little bit laggy. So hopefully we'll get through this without too many technical glitches. I see on the screen that
so far.
well, let's keep our fingers crossed. I also see that we're joined by my colleague, Joe Mazer, this morning from the CVSR. Joe's the CEO of the railroad. So we, if I don't have something at my fingertips, I know Joe sharing here going.
And then Ivan, the other thing that I'll suggest as you get your screen sharing, probably just turn your video off. That'll probably help with the internet bandwidth as well.
I'll do that right now. So suddenly I don't see show all windows. Okay. And just by way of introduction, my name is Ivan Kasovic. I work for the National Park Service here at Cuyahoga Valley. And before that, I was at 8 different national parks, including Denali National Park, where I got to work with the Alaska Railroad, and also at Grand Canyon with the Grand Canyon Railroad. And over these years, I've worked at a bunch of different national parks. Cuyahoga Valley is my landing spot. This is where I'll spend the rest of my career, and being able to participate in this project has been a real treat so far, and it's something that I really do want to share with everybody else. This project that I'm going to describe has been, more than 25 years in the making. It's sort of our, we consider it part of our manifest destiny down here in the National Park Service. And so I want to share with you a little bit about why we feel that this is so important, really. And then we'll talk a little bit about the details and how we're going to do it. But I want to spend a little bit of time this morning on why we want to do it. And I'll just jump into it here. The thing we're trying to accomplish, and if you're not familiar with Cuyahoga Valley, we're going to talk a little bit about the background of the park as well. But the thing we're trying to accomplish is to connect the city of Cleveland to the national park through alternative transportation. And the park was established, let me go forward here. The park was established in 1974. And
hey, Ivan, just one thing. So we're looking at the PowerPoint. We didn't see the slide advance there.
How are we doing now?
Yeah, I think maybe just try unsharing and then resharing. I think it might have grabbed the wrong screen. Okay, it unshared. That's promising.
All right. How are we doing now?
Not yet.
And
yeah, nothing. Okay, now it looks like it started screen sharing. Okay, so I see the PowerPoint.
Okay, very good. We're still sharing?
Yep, yeah. So it's the PowerPoint. There we go. Now I see slides. Maybe just advance it real quick. And yep, okay, now we're good.
Okay,
Thank
very
you,
good.
Ivan.
Yeah, so no, thanks. We'll get through this together. All right, so as a way of context, Cuyahoga Valley National Park stretches, it's south of Cleveland. And if you look on the left there, you'll see the layout of the park runs between Independence, Ohio, so about 10 miles south of Cleveland, down to Akron, 33,000 acres of National Park Service land. And through that runs the Cuyahoga River. Adjacent to that, the old Ohio and Erie Canalway with the very popular towpath trail, and then also the historic rails of the Valley Railway that connected Akron and Cleveland historically. That was brought back to life back in the 1970s, really to connect the Cleveland Zoo with the Hale Farm and Village, which was it's a historical site. And what we have not been able to do since establishing the railway is to be able to connect not just Akron, but also Cleveland. There's 10 miles of the old track, the old B&O and Valley Railway track, now owned by CSX, that runs north of our northern terminus all the way to Tower City, right in the heart of Cleveland. And so if you look at the map on the right, that's what we're looking at there. So to get that additional trackage, we've been working with these partners for a couple, between 1 and 2 years now in this most recent effort. And the real difference this time is that this coalition of agencies and groups that we're working with has adopted and shared this vision that we're sharing with you today. And we're very fortunate to be working underneath the aegis of our MPO, NOACA, who has led the effort to get a feasibility study up and running to figure out how we're going to do this. So a little bit more about the why. What we think we can do is actually realize the original intent of the establishment of the park. Going back to 1974, there was a movement to establish national parks near urban centers. We not only have national parks all over the West and all 400 sites all over the country in beautiful places like Rocky Mountain and Grand Canyon, but we also established these parks closer to urban centers so that people that never get an opportunity to travel too far from home would also be able to benefit from the things that National Park Service brings to us as Americans. And so ourselves, along with Gateway National Park in New York, just outside of New York City, Santa Monica Mountains outside of LA, and also the Golden Gate Recreation Area in San Francisco were established for that purpose. And we've done a pretty good job over the 50 years that we've been here to reach out to Northeast Ohio, 4 million people that are within a 1-hour drive of us. And it's slowly gained more and more interest amongst the community. And now we're starting to draw visitors from all over the country. As it's become more popular, we've dealt with problems of congestion, and we've dealt with the problems of being popular. What we also have realized is that we have not really made this connection to the people of Cleveland. I can go down into downtown Akron and say I'm from the National Park Service, and people pretty much get it. They know where the national park is. They know what we're about. I can walk into Cleveland and walk into a group of folks and talk about Cuyahoga Valley National Park, and the eyes sort of look up and to the left, and they're trying to think where would that be. So we have unfinished work to do there. The other thing that we know is that Clevelanders, many of them do not have access to automobiles. About 25% of Clevelanders don't drive. And we want to be able to use this opportunity to really connect those folks in a way that we just can't otherwise. It's really hard to get to the park through RTA because the bus just doesn't, it's just not effective. And we really see that in the future, if we continue to just depend on automobiles to get people back and forth, we're really missing an opportunity right now to take advantage of the money that's available to us through the infrastructure law, and also to take one more swing at this before time ticks away. So we're very fortunate that in the 26 miles of trackage inside the park, we partner with the Cuyahoga Valley Scenic Railroad, And the Cuyahoga Valley Scenic Railroad is our nonprofit partner that operates the trains and offers all of the services. The National Park Service maintains the track and takes care of the maintenance of the trackage. And so together we sort of have looked at how do we get into the city and be able to offer the same thing we offer inside the park to those outside. And it really has fit very well with other things that we're trying to do in the National Park Service to open up these opportunities that we've described. What we think we can do is we can take our current ridership, which is just north of 200,000 people in a high year, and expand that in a variety of different ways. Right now we run a consist of a big long train, and we move a lot of people. We also move a lot of bicycles and boats. The bike aboard program and the kayak aboard program, now called the Explore program, is just a great way for folks to ride, walk, or paddle through part of the park and then take the train back to their car. Each time they do that, especially with the boats, for a kayaker to paddle through the park from one end to the other, it's a beautiful day's paddle, but you got to bring 2 cars to do a shuttle. We have found it incredibly popular to be able to offer that to folks as a one-way shuttle, so you can leave your car at the takeout, ride the train with your boat to your put-in, and then paddle back to your car. Imagine being able to do that, or a bike trip all the way to downtown Cleveland. So improving this backbone that we've already got and expanding it is really what we're all about. We want to make these opportunities available to a wider audience and to reduce the congestion in the park, and also to connect Clevelanders not just to the national park, but also through the national park for any variety of purposes. We believe that a feasibility study will probably show us opportunities to get folks to special events, either bringing people into the park to attend a concert at the Blossom Music Center inside the park, or any of the other events we host, but also to move people from the local areas up and down the valley up to Cleveland for sporting events or cultural events or anything like that. So the values that we see here that I've been describing are values that we believe this project can help us realize. And this gets into how we are doing this together with others. This idea has been embraced by the MPO, as I described, and we have just kicked off a couple weeks ago the feasibility study that will take the 2 previous studies that were done in the 90s and update them, see what it would take to negotiate the access to the tracks, what it would take to upgrade the existing infrastructure, and how we would actually arrive in the city. We've got a couple of great opportunities to work with just tons of different people that are helping us with this. It was a long, hard slog to get the towpath trail connected all the way to Canal Basin Park. But through that effort, we really spent a lot of time between ourselves, the heritage area, and all the other stakeholders to work together for something that everybody wanted, desired, and it's been incredibly popular. That same group is now getting together on this project. So that's helpful. We're not starting from zero here. And we've also built support outside of our little area, and that's one of the reasons we're talking to you today, is that we really believe that there are opportunities to not only do this one piece of moving people back and forth to the national park, but to integrate this into the larger effort that you all are involved in to bring more efficient rail service to Ohio generally. And we also think that we're going to find opportunities to move people through the park in all kinds of new ways that will match very nicely with the efforts that are underway to move folks around the state and across the country. So we're going to wrap up here in a little bit, but I want to talk, just to set the stage a little bit about what we need to do in this feasibility study so that it meshes nicely with what you all are advocating for more generally. As some of you know, the Bedrock project in downtown Cleveland is a transformative development that will change Tower City, which is the, that central transit hub of the city of Cleveland, into this spectacular, to be determined residential, commercial, and otherwise effective, gathering place in the middle of Cleveland. And so we've been having talks with both the Bedrock Company and the city on, how are we gonna get in there? That last mile of track, we've got a jackknife bridge we've got to get across to the East Bank, and then that last mile of track, it's going to be kind of tricky, and particularly where we end up in the Bedrock facility is going to be super important. One of the reasons we think it's so important is because we want to have the tightest connection to RTA we possibly can. And the reason for that is that we just know it'll be more attractive if you can ride RTA to the Bedrock property and then have the closest connection to the train possible. We'd also like to be close to the river and to the towpath so that it's easy for people to use it as a way to move boats and bikes. So that's some tricky business. They're very receptive. We've had lots of great meetings with them, but they're moving faster, frankly, than we had been moving. We were sort of a little bit late to the game. So one of the first orders of business in the feasibility study, which is being undertaken by AECom, is to really sit down with Bedrock planners, the city planners, and our consultants, and figure out what the best alternative might be. We've been assured by all parties that this is something everybody wants to do. We're in a unique position of having a popular project that folks want to get done. It's just going to be a matter of how we get it done. The other piece, of course, is working with the CSX Corporation, and we've had some high-level talks already. But as all of you folks from the railroading world know, this is a tricky business. And so the other piece that we're working on right up front is to have some really open dialogue and to bring both Bedrock and CSX in as stakeholders and partners into this project. If you take a look to the at this slide I've got up right now, this was a demonstration run that we did in 1995, where we worked with CSX to sort of do a proof of concept to bring the train all the way up into downtown. And it really showed that it can be done. Of course, Tower City looks very different now than it did then, and it will look completely different in the future. And where we end up at Tower City, we've got our desires. It's going to be an interesting piece of business for folks interested in railroading. One of the things that we have suggested, or we've promoted, or sort of daylighted, and this has mostly been Ken Sislak doing this on behalf of the railroad, is the idea that we could perhaps do a street running train right up into the development. They're going to be rearranging quite a bit of the roadways there, and we think that this would be just a really great addition to what they've got planned there. So whether we're street running, whether we're stop short, we're really looking forward to working with these folks and figuring out how it's going to work. And that's the end of the presentation. And I'm very happy to answer questions.
Yeah, and then maybe Evan, if you want to stop sharing, but like what questions do we have online and about this project that we're all so excited for? While we're thinking of questions, I did put a little map, and Ivan, I don't know if I've even shared that with you, but Ken Prendergast had put together a little map showing just how close Blossom is to the CVSR. The actual distances the crows fly is not even as far as the farthest out grass parking lots. So it's right there.
Yeah,
Okay,
the
you have a question,
possibilities
Paul.
are all over.
Have you
Looks like
tried
this
to
is-
get a direct RTA connection to the Rockside Station?
So we did some work with RTA a few years ago, and currently the closest you can get a bus is to the corner of Rockside and 21, and so that just has people walking along Rockside down to the to the Rockside Road Station.
Mhm.
Just really not all that far, but it's cumbersome and it's not very attractive.
No, it's
So
not.
yeah, they just didn't see the ridership being strong enough to get any closer than that.
This is just such a major gap. I mean, you know, just to run a bus connection some way several times a day, you know, just during the season. It's not at most 5 days a week, a couple of times a day. It just, you would think that they could get a bus there. I just,
Ivan,
That's
what is the timeline on this study that NOAC is going to be doing? Do you know when it might be completed?
Yeah, we're moving very fast. So we have a timeline that has us wrapping up in January.
Wow.
Glenn, go ahead.
And we got a little bit of a late start, so that might get pushed back a little bit, but it is a top concern to get this work done so that it matches with Bedrock.
Okay.
And
Thanks.
and Ivan, Glenn Ryan from Toledo. How's the finances there? The reason why I ask is because Wallet Hub has for 4 years named Cleveland the most distressed city in America out of 150 municipalities. And the fact that you've got 25 people or percent of your people that don't ride cars tells that's kind of a game changer. Don't feel bad because Toledo is 16th of the most
Yeah.
distressed city.
Yeah.
So how's the funding there?
Well, you know, that's one of the things that we think, part of what the feasibility study will tell us is, you know, first of all, what are we looking at in terms of capital improvement? And so, you know, how are we going to fund these things? The good news is that our MPO NOACA has identified this project as one of their top 5 for the next, you know, dozen years or so. So, you know, that's really good. All of that federal grant funding, of course, comes through the MPO. So having it being identified as a priority should help us substantially, particularly when it comes to the capital improvement costs. The second thing that I would say is that both in the feasibility study and also a separate study that we'll be doing through the Volpe Center that's being put together by DOT is to look at alternative operating models for CVSR and finding out a way that we can make this service, you know, sustainable economically. So we have a public good that we want to offer up to the city, and we absolutely understand that means that we're probably gonna be doing some really commercial things as well to help pay for the service.
Thank
Ivan,
you.
thanks, Glenn. Ivan, there's a question in the chat, so I'll just read it in case you don't see that. So the question is Bedrock on board to see it through to Tower City, or are they moving faster on the development plans without considering this? So maybe just a few more thoughts on that topic.
Yeah, they are so they are on board, and our talks with Bedrock have been really positive. It's more a question of how. So there's nobody saying no, we don't want this at all. It's more a question of where and how it would work. And you know, it's important to put this in context. The City Planning Commission is very supportive of this project as well. They're a key partner, and there are lots of things about the Bedrock development that are going to take a lot of negotiation between the city and the development. And this is just part of that. So there are issues around realignment of roads that have to be worked through, placement of buildings, etc. So we're not alone in being, you know, a voice of where do we fit in here. And so I can't tell you how it's all going to turn out. We don't know. But what I can tell you is we've got a really good, strong partnership with the city who's also advocating on our behalf.
Thank you.
In the chat, I just put in train services through Toledo. I did a little bit of a study, and what I did was I showed I did kind of a customer service thing. If I was a person in midday wanting to go to these 3 points, where could I get there in a reasonable time, and could I do it as a round trip? And if you look at the file, and I'm just concentrating on Cleveland, the only times that we can get up there over to Cleveland. Now, first of all, the cost is reasonable, $12. And if you're a senior, it's only $10.80, and that's if you're in the coach. But it leaves Toledo at 3:15 and it arrives at 5:38 a.m. And then the next one doesn't depart till about noon, about midnight, and it gets in there at 1 a.m. or almost 2 a.m. And to get back, you've got 2 choices. You got 3 o'clock, or you got 4 o'clock in the morning. So these build. One thing that we definitely have to do, because I love the idea of popping your bike on the train, taking it over to Cleveland's National Park, tooling around there and coming back. That's awesome. And especially with kayak, I'm a big kayaker. So one of the roadblocks to getting more people into the park would be, at least from the Toledo end, is to develop reasonable rail service from Toledo to Cleveland.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I think
absolutely.
that fits in just so well with our overall advocacy. And I know a lot of us are really hoping to see the Cleveland, Toledo, Detroit that got funding through the Corridor ID program, and that would go a long way to addressing that specific concern. So thank you for sharing that. So any other questions for Ivan and Joe specific on the CVSR and that proposal?
I just see one popped up in the chat about special event service. Yeah, we'll be looking at special event service, absolutely. Also, CVSR has 4 of these RDCs, rail diesel cars, that they're already using for special events. And we're, both CVSR and the National Park Service, we're really interested in looking at different kinds of ways to provide service. So running small trains just for boats and bikes, running the North Pole Adventure out of downtown Cleveland. The possibilities are endless. So we're excited about it, and we're really looking forward to seeing what all the smart consultants and rail professionals have to tell us about what's going to work best for us.
Looks like we got a question from the Youngstown group.
Hey, Brian or Ivan, this is Mary Krupa from Youngstown. I just wanted I know from some of the past meetings, we talked about this route and about the speed. And is this going to be, I don't know if it was 45 miles per hour, or are you going to try for high-speed rail? How's that going to work out?
We're not. We're hopeful, and we'd be wonderfully surprised if people use this as sort of a way to get from work to downtown or whatever. As Joe says, we're in the people moving business. But through the national park, we're going to keep our speeds where they are, which is, around 25 miles per hour. So this is not going to be a fast trip by any means. And just knowing what we have between us and Cleveland, I'd be surprised if we were providing fast service. So while that's not part of our mission, high-speed rail service, we're also just interested to find out, what the possibilities are for the service that we can't provide. We want to keep things, safe and calm, especially as we're going through the national park.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I think that was all the questions on this. A couple of things go back and forth in the chat, but that was really wonderful. What we were hoping to see. So many of us are so excited for this, and we've got current users of the existing service, but just the usefulness of it becomes so much more if it gets into downtown Cleveland. So we really appreciate the leadership on continuing to push for that project and get all of the right people in the room. One of the reasons that I really liked having this conversation as a part of it is just the coalition that I've been in the National Park Service, and Joe and the CVSR and everybody else has been involved. Building that coalition to try and make this happen, I think, is a pretty good example for all of us as we advocate for passenger rail, just how many different people and leaders and community folks that you need to get involved to make projects like this happen. And I mean, we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but I'm glad there's a big group of people really working hard on trying to make this happen. Youngstown, did you guys have another question there?
Yes,
Yes, my name is Bill Neff, and I'm from Youngstown, Boardman. And the question I have is, that trackage you talked about that is now used by CSX, would you have to share that with CSX, or would they have to abandon it and turn it over to you folks to use that line?
Yeah, it is to be determined. When we did this project, when we last made a run at this, our negotiations with CSX sort of ended, and the project initiative sort of ended right there with the agreement to have rights to travel over those tracks and what would be required in liability to do that. So it's not a very heavily used piece of track anymore. There's just a couple customers left on there. And I would just say that, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're looking at it as everything is on the table. Let's sit down and start talking, and we can figure it out from there. So we don't have any preconceived ideas about what the arrangement would look like at this time.
Thank you.
Great. So yeah, again, thank you very much, Ivan, Joe. Really appreciate it. That's just such an exciting project to be seeing. So let's go ahead and turn it over to Ed. Talk through a little bit through this. And let's see. So Ed, are we good? You still? There we go. That
Yep.
looks promising. All right, I see your screen.
Let me see if I can get it into slideshow mode here. Does that work?
Yep, we see it. All right, go ahead.
All right, before I get into the guts of the presentation, I just want to do a real quick on the Lakeshore Rail Alliance, because I'm sure a lot of you don't know who we are. We are an umbrella organization comprised of 8 passenger rail advocacy organizations across 6 states, from Illinois to New York. And All Aboard Ohio is one of those members. And our focus is on the Lakeshore, what we call the Lakeshore Corridor between Chicago and New York and Boston. We want to see improvements in service, both corridor service and through service. Ultimately, we would like to see 6 through trains between Chicago and the East Coast along this line. And our initial ask is just at some point is going to be just to split the Lakeshore into a separate Boston train and a separate New York train, and then go from there. This line we see is very important. It's some ways I would say it's as important as the Northeast Corridor, because it connects the 2 biggest mega regions in the United States, both in terms of population and land area. It's 118 million people. And as you can see on this map here, all kind of other possible routes here either connect with or cross this line. So this is the major trunk line in the Northwest quadrant of the United States. So that's what our focus is. And now I want to get on to the main part of this presentation. I want to come at the issue of why we need more transportation options, including and in particular passenger rail, from a bit of a different angle than what we hear the most about. I mean, everybody knows about economic development, workforce mobility, environment, and all that, but I want to come at this, kind of zoom out and get a little bigger picture view. And I know there'll be a few things that people know, but there's also going to be some things that you don't know. And my hope is that some of these things will get incorporated into our advocacy message, because they are important. So in order to, before I do that even, I want to try to knock everybody out of the American transportation paradigm with this slide. Who here has more transportation freedom? The picture on the right is somewhere in the United States. The picture on the left is somewhere in the Netherlands. And if you can't see it, that red circle in the picture on the right is some poor guy trying to cross this 5-lane road. And when I look at this picture and I think we are the richest country in the world, and is this the best we can do for our people? So this was a slide that I'd want to kind of jar people's transportation paradigm with. So now let's kind of move on here. I think the first place we need to start is, just to acknowledge that we are in a full-blown mobility crisis in the United States. Flying's a hassle, driving's a hassle. These are just some headlines that just from 2023, and there were a lot of them, checking out how difficult it is to travel in the United States. Airports are crowded, highways are crowded. Accident on the highway can delay you for hours. I had a friend post on social media, they got delayed for 7 hours in West Virginia last August or something because of an accident. Or if there's a weather delay in the aviation system in one city, those delays will ripple throughout the country. So, and we have this problem because we don't have enough options, viable options. So let's take a look at the modes individually here, and we'll start with driving. And I think the first thing we need to acknowledge is how expensive it is to own and operate an automobile. And the situation is getting so bad that car loans are maybe one of the next financial bubbles to burst. Car debt is at an all-time high. People are really struggling to afford cars. The average new car payment is over $700 a month. The used, it's over $500. A lease is about $600. The chief economist of Cox Automotive came out and said last year that 50% of Americans are being priced out of the new and used car market. And what he means by that is not that half of Americans aren't buying cars, but they're having to use financing mechanisms that are very disadvantageous in order to afford an automobile. For example, the 7-year loan to buy a car is now commonplace. And the problem with the 7-year loan is about year 4 or 5, you owe more on the car than it's worth because of the depreciation. So if you get in an accident, your insurance payment isn't going to be able to pay off your loan, but yet, because this is the United States, and for the 99% of the country, if you don't own a car, you don't get there, you're in the hole pretty deep just to try to get another car. And as of 2023, student loan debt has surpassed, auto loan debt has surpassed student loan debt in the United States. Auto debt has increased a staggering 28% from 2020 to 2023. As I already mentioned, we got clogged highways. We've increased our lane miles in the United States by 42% since 1993. Congestion has gone up by 142%. But adding new lanes doesn't work. And pretty much every Department of Transportation in the country hasn't recognized this yet, because we keep doubling down on expanding highways when all it's doing is creating induced demand and adding to our maintenance backlog for our highways. We have a huge maintenance backlog. And if we keep building them, new lane miles, we're going to reach a point where we're not going to be able to afford to fix the stuff anymore. So we need to do some things differently. We're leaving entire populations of people behind. Just in Ohio alone, 400,000 households don't have access to a car. 1.5 million have to share one car. And another problem that's a particular problem in Ohio is an issue with suspended licenses, many of which are debt-based suspensions because somebody owes money on a traffic ticket or court costs or something. And these are the people at the bottom of the economic ladder. And we all want people to work and not be on the dole, right? Well, if you're at the bottom of the economic ladder, you're already struggling. How expensive it is to own a car. You get a traffic ticket, you make a mistake, get a ticket. You have trouble paying it and your license gets suspended. So now what do? They either drive with a suspended license or they don't work. And if you drive with a suspended license and get pulled over again, you make another mistake, you could wind up in jail. So this is, really hurting a lot of people with this, car-centric transportation mindset that we have in this country. All right, let's take a look at aviation. over 100 cities have lost air service in the last 40 years. These are like small, medium-sized cities. And even more have seen service reductions. And this is a trend that's going to continue because airlines can't make money serving small airports. They just can't. So how are we going to connect these cities now to larger metropolitan areas as well as with each other? Because airlines can't do it. This is the U.S. Travel Association did a study last year, and this was the headline for their press release. And they were talking about how because it is such a hassle to fly between delays and security hassles and the fact that just flying is it's basically a bus now. And it's actually, in some cases, it's worse than a Greyhound bus because they have even less legroom. But people, Americans, are deferring some trips because they don't want to have to deal with the hassle of flying. And U.S. Travel Association has determined that it's resulting in about a $71 billion loss to the economy from lost travel spending. I would like to see a study that takes a look at deferred trips because people don't want to make the drive, because just from personal experience, I can tell you there's plenty of places my wife and I would like to go for a weekend getaway, but because you have to drive there, we stay home. And I'm sure that number for deferred driving trips is even bigger. And, most people are familiar with this. We have really lousy train service. This is what we had in 1962. Here's where we were in 1978. Here's where we are now. Hopefully with the IIJA, things are going to turn around. Hopefully funding will continue, but that's with the federal government, but that's not a guarantee. But anyway, and then buses are intercity buses. It's the same thing. These were all the intercity bus routes that we had in Ohio in 1979. Although ignore the red dash lines, those were Amtrak routes superimposed on here. But as you can see, we had 5 Amtrak routes in 1975, and we have 3 now. But this is the bus service we have today. So even we've lost a significant amount of bus routes. And most of your bus riders, they're at the bottom of the economic ladder. And more than a quarter of them wouldn't be able to make their trip if a bus wasn't there. But service keeps shrinking. And a few years ago, Greyhound was bought out by a German company called Flixbus. And Flixbus has been spinning off all of the Greyhound station properties to a hedge fund. And the hedge fund is selling those properties off. And so Greyhound is having to move to more remote locations that don't have other good transit connections. This has already happened in Columbus, and it's going to happen in Cleveland. It's only a matter of time. So we just keep doing worse and worse for people with our transportation options. I mean, in public transit, another problem. A lot of U.S. cities have transit deserts where people have a really hard time just trying to, get access to jobs or healthcare, whatever they need. Our transit systems are poorly designed. They're designed around commuting rather than a convenient option to be used all day long and well into the evening 7 days a week. We all know in Ohio how poorly public transit is funded. But compared to other industrialized countries, our transit systems are designed really bad because not just because they're infrequent, but because we slap buses down on the same streets and roads that are clogged with car traffic, and so they become unreliable and nobody wants to use them. They don't, you might, if you're lucky, on some routes if the bus runs hourly. We've had this attitude where transit is considered a social welfare program rather than a public utility. We treat roads and highways as a public utility, and we throw all kinds of money at them and subsidize driving 6 ways from Sunday but public transit is a social welfare program, and you get what you pay for. If you treat it as a social welfare program, then only the desperate and the destitute are going to use it. And I've heard that there are plenty of people in the Ohio legislature that when you talk about transit, they don't get it. And they said, well, we got buses running half empty or empty now. What's, you know, why would we want to spend more? And the reason is you get what you pay for. And we don't pay to get anything anywhere close to decent in the state of Ohio. We are isolating our small cities and rural areas, and it's harming their economic viability. This Tom Carper, who's a board member for Amtrak and a former mayor, had this to say at Amtrak's board meeting just this past December. Changing workplace norms have created more opportunity for people to seek communities with the slower pace, great environment, and better quality of life. But if you're trying to commute or recruit a hospital administrator to a rural area, just as an example, it's really difficult, but it's a lot easier if that community can offer the opportunity for you to get on a train several times a day to get to the city. And you know, we have a lot of small cities in Ohio like this: Sandusky, you know, Elyria, Bryan, Middletown, Crestline, you know, that are being segregated from economic opportunity just because of a lack of transportation options. All right, I'm going to switch gears here a little bit. This is another area where having transportation options is important. And before I get into that, I just want to mention, if you haven't heard of the organization called Strong Towns, look them up. They're on social media, they do podcasts, and they are really starting to have an impact across the United States. It's a nonprofit organization, and their mission is to make cities more financially productive. Because after World War II, when the United States chose to go with a car-centric development model, it really put our cities in a very precarious financial situation. Most cities are basically on the verge of bankruptcy because car-centric development is the least efficient and most expensive form of development you can go with. And virtually every city in America, the infrastructure liability just from roads and streets and having to have, you know, water, all that stuff, is actually dwarfs their pension liabilities. Everybody thinks public pensions are the problem, but it's not. It's infrastructure, and it's because we've chosen this car-centric development model. So in order to change this, the first thing we need to do is to revitalize our downtowns, our downtown cores, because the mixed-use traditional downtown style development, actually, they're the money generators for cities. And I'm going to show you a slide about that next. But, you know, the car-centric cul-de-sac stuff like you have, you know, see in the bottom picture, those are basically their financial black holes for cities. And even the strip malls and the big box stores surrounded by oceans of parking, they're barely able to cover the infrastructure costs that are put on cities in order to maintain them. Strong Town sometimes works with an organization called Urban 3, and what they do is they work with cities to analyze this situation with infrastructure and tax revenue generation, and to look at what is the city's financial picture? Where are they generating the most tax money? Where are they losing the most money? And this is an example from Lafayette, Louisiana. I wish I could have had one from Ohio, but to date, there hasn't been a city in Ohio that has worked with Urban 3 yet. Maybe in the future. But if you take a look at this, this is the tax revenue versus financial liabilities for infrastructure in Lafayette. And as you can see, the area that's in the black and well in the black is the downtown core. All the stuff that's bleeding red on the periphery, this is all the post-World War II car-centric stuff that they built, just like every city in America. And just to show you this from an Ohio perspective, in 1970, we had a little over 10.5 million people. Our population has gone up about 9% since then, but we have 20% more highway lane miles, and our suburban sprawl land area has increased by 60%. Now, this should tell you two things. Number one, on a per capita basis, a per person basis, we have a lot more infrastructure costs today than we did in 1970. because we pursued a car-centric development model. Because car-centric development is the most expensive and least efficient type of development we can possibly do. The second thing this should tell you is that you cannot have both low taxes and car-centric development. You can have one or the other, but you can't have both. And this is just a drive home the point slide from Strong Towns. Car-centric development is what perpetual debt looks like, and not just for cities, but remember what I said about how expensive it is to own a car, because, and you know, everybody is in that boat. We all have to have a car. I know I can tell you from personal experience, my home finances would be many tens of thousands of dollars richer if we didn't have to have two cars. Obviously, in order to do this, we need more transportation options, buses, trains, you know, everything else. But we also need to change how we develop our cities. And that traditional downtown style mixed-use development is illegal in virtually every city in America. Several have changed and more are changing, but it's still illegal in the vast majority of the country. And just a quick example, I think a lot of you are familiar with Normal, Illinois. They are on the Chicago St. Louis line that's 110 miles an hour. And this is their train station, a relatively new one they built just a few years ago. They invested $85 million in this train station and also made some improvements to their downtown. And they got $175 million return in private investment. And Normal, Illinois is now a place people want to go because you can get off the train and you can wander around this nice downtown. You know, when you think of your typical suburban environment with a 6-lane Strode and, you know, strip malls and big box stores, those aren't places you want to linger, are they? You go in and you do your business and you leave. I mean, even if you're going to go eat at a restaurant in one of those places, you go in and eat your dinner and you leave. It's not a place you want to linger and hang out, but a nice, quaint downtown like this, where it's safe to walk and there's not a lot of traffic. You want to linger, and places where people linger, they spend more money. And if you're spending more money, the land has more value. So you're spending more money helps the city, the increased land value helps the city and improves their financial picture. So that's the end of my presentation. Does anybody have any questions?
Thanks, Ed. That was great. And there's a few comments in the chat. But yeah, are there any questions for Ed?
Yeah, this is Bill Hutchison here. You know, Ed has been a real leader in this Lakeshore Rail Alliance, and we became involved with this 2 or 3 years ago, and this is where this has led us. The fact that for many areas, even within large metropolitan areas, but especially smaller cities, we are really in a transportation desert. And unless things change, we will remain in a transportation desert. And that really has a huge, huge negative impact in many, many ways. Glenn was talking about riding from Toledo to Cleveland. Okay, you get off in Cleveland, what do you have to do? You're going to have to walk clear across downtown to get the Cuyahoga Valley line. Shouldn't have to do that. Erie, Pennsylvania, down to their last flight to Charlotte, North Carolina. Probably will lose that. Other cities have gone through the same thing, as Ed points out. It's a major problem. We have a mobility crisis, and by extension, we have an economic crisis for people who can't or don't want to drive everywhere. And as Ed points out, it's becoming more and more expensive. So obviously, we have to do something different. And that thing that's different to our way of thinking is more and better intercity rail passenger service, tied in, you know, tightly with local transit, cycling, other forms of shuttles or what have you to get around. It should be that you don't need a schedule to ride a train or a bus. You know there's going to be one in 10 minutes or a half an hour, whatever, any time of day. And that's really what our goal is. You know, to get a little bit into the weeds, we think there should be at least a half a dozen New York Cleveland, Chicago round trips, plus a like number of corridor services. If you want to serve that corridor the way it ought to be served, you're talking about a region that's, huge. It's a third of the national population. And yet we only have one train between these two mega regions. It's crazy. It wouldn't happen in another country. I guarantee you that. So, this is why we're doing what we're doing. We saw a need for a more regional approach for advocacy. What All Aboard Ohio does in Ohio is terrific. Great win with the studies for the 3C corridor, 3C and D corridor, and Cleveland, Toledo, Detroit. But obviously more is needed. And really, Cleveland ought to be the major hub between the East Coast and Chicago. There's no reason why it shouldn't be.
Oh, great. So,
I question in the chat. It says, what's the best thing we can do to advocate? Well, take these arguments out onto social media. Take these arguments to your representatives. That's especially the second thing. Take them to your representatives. Try to help them understand. Call your congressperson's office and ask to speak to their transportation staffer and talk to them about this.
yeah, thanks.
I see Paul Woodring's got a question.
Yeah, well, I live less than 3 blocks from the busiest bus route on the Akron transit system. There are no sidewalks in my neighborhood, and I live in the apartment area of Fairlawn, and there is absolutely no safe way to walk to the West Market bus line, which is the busiest route in the Akron metro system. And I don't know how many times I've had to swerve around mothers with several children in tow, trying to walk in the middle, or down the side of Miller Road or Chamberlain or New Hampshire to try and get to Fairlawn Plaza, the major shopping area. And it's just unconscionable. It's a prosperous suburb, but there are no sidewalks for these apartments. It's just a minor symptom of the greater problem of being able not just to drive anywhere, but even to walk anywhere.
Yep.
Yes. Good. So, I'm going to stick around and continue to ask questions, but I want to make sure. Thank you very much to both of our presenters today. A lot of really great information, good conversation going on here. Great conversation in the chat as well. So thank you very much for your time. And if you're interested in what we're doing, please do register for some of our upcoming events. We will look forward to seeing you. And with that, I am going to conclude the formal meeting. And in the recording, but I do want to emphasize that I'm going to stick around, and I'm sure Ed and Bill will stick around. So
Yeah, I'll stick
thank you very
around
much
if
for
anyone else
attending our
wants to
meeting.
talk. Yeah, I'll stick around.
Yeah, same here.